Hey folks, welcome back and thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Pavement Group podcast. Today we're going to dive into pavement assessments. The first couple episodes we talked a little bit about them, how we perform them, the tool that we've built. Today we're going to talk a little bit more to facilities managers and property managers about why it's important to have the right one, how you can utilize that tool to really save you time, to save you money, to help you with all parts of the budgeting process. So I'm joined today by our usual co-host here, Brian Hess. Hello, Brian.
What's happening, man? Thanks for having us.
You bet. Thanks for letting me take control this week. This is an honor. This is great to be
my pleasure, man.
Here.
My pleasure. People get tired of listening to the same person, so we're gonna mix it up for everybody, right?
Why not? We'll mix it up. They never get tired of you. We'll mix it up. And Mike Hukim, hi Mike, how are you?
I am great, Todd. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, you bet, man. You bet. So these are two guys that have architected. Is that a word? They're the architects of what I think is the best pavement assessment tool out there in the industry. Spent the last few years, or maybe 4 or 5 years, cobbling away at this thing. We've got it to a point where I just think it's top of class. I think it's one of the best ones out there. And through doing that, obviously you guys did a tremendous amount of research and a tremendous amount of trial and error. And you can talk specifically about why you ended up with the product that we have now. So I kind of want to get into that and talk a little bit about, let me get my questions up here. Talk a little bit about, why a pavement assessment tool, maybe ours in particular, is such a crucial tool for facilities and property managers. Let's talk about how information is power. You can take that information to do so many different things, leverage it to really help them in their jobs. Brian, would you expand on that? So information is power. That's something that you like to say a lot when you're talking about these type assessments. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think, the number one thing when I came into the industry was, noticing that the information is really what was lacking, and for property and facility managers that are responsible for managing just a ton of different assets. And typically these assets are either spread over a city or a region or sometimes an entire section of the country. And so, having that information at their fingertips was something that I always saw was missing. It was like the property and facility managers have a really easy time, or an easier time, managing their pavement assets specifically. And you could broadcast that across all of the different industries of things that they have to manage, whether it be roofs, landscaping, pavement, et cetera. But not having that information and kind of treating things on a site-by-site basis, trying to get proposals back and then make decisions based on numbers on a piece of paper, it just was never really good enough for them to be able to make the right informed decisions, right? They were making decisions almost blindfolded because they didn't have that information. And so if you take this back to way back when, before anything existed in the industry, we were providing photos to people and putting, numbers on a map, kind of back in the days of Paint, if you guys remember that program. And, coordinating that, it took just extensive amounts of time to compile all of that information. And so we were trying to find different ways to be able to do that. But we've been doing this, on a case-by-case, site-by-site basis for as long as I could remember. And as we started to provide that information to clients, that information became very powerful for them and allowed them, again, just to make simpler and easier and better decisions by just providing them information. One of the things that I say all the time is, my 7-year-old daughter could make, informed decisions on parking lots from photos. It's pretty easy to understand what you're looking at when you see it. But if you do not have the information, if you don't have a level of transparency in the information and the data coming from your contractor, it becomes more difficult to make the right decisions. And what we've seen, and Mike can expand on this, is that, as we provide this level of information to clients, the amount of money that they're able to spend and make that money a lot more effective becomes the biggest differentiator, right? So if you spend $100,000 with informed decisions, it goes a lot further than it does when you are just reacting on a site-by-site basis. So we're going to get into some of that today here, but that is what information is power means to me. It's providing them as much information as they need to be able to make the right decisions and to give them all of that time back that it would have taken them to be able to make those types of decisions in the first place.
All right. Awesome. That's great information. Appreciate that. Mike, I'm going to ask you the same question. So as you were building this out, what sort of feedback were you getting as far as the information that your customers wanted that you ended up putting into this tool?
Well, the biggest thing is just being able to differentiate from site to site. When I came into this industry, the hardest thing I had was customers were asking for apples to apples comparisons from their contractors. So one contractor got to decide what that apples to apples comparison was, whether the relationship was for 6 months or 6 years, even if I felt like that was the wrong scope to be done at that point in time. So I had a hard time trying to do apples to apples comparisons for people when I thought that the information wasn't proper for what I felt like needed to be done, whether they made the scope based on what was easiest for them, what they've done in the past, didn't ask enough right questions, or whatever that was. So that apples to apples thing was what really started me out down this path of trying to create a systematic approach to creating an assessment for every single property that somebody might have, to where that they can take this information and then make good decisions based on an information that they trust in us, because we give them transparency in what we're doing and the experience that we have had in doing this. And also, I mean, once you see that information that's given out, it is overwhelming enough to say that we trust this, because it is everything that they can imagine.
Sure.
Yeah. All the things that they need. So that's what started me in this process, is just being able to create the process from being on a property to be able to give a proper scope, to be able to give proper recommendations, and then also create plans for the future was what started me on this whole process. And then it has just snowballed and become more and more appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish for our clients.
Okay. And that cuts that sometimes confusing step out when you're going out to bid, putting out an RFP, of having to, you're right, kind of rely on one contractor, even though you're bringing in 3 or 4 to bid the project, but one contractor's scope, which might be right, might not be right. You can create the scope yourself and hand it to everybody based on the information you have. That's pretty key. All right. Question number 2. I'm going to start with you, Mike. So when you're using this tool to make big picture portfolio driven decisions versus reacting on a site-by-site basis, how does that create that efficiency for you, where you can make a decision again based on the entire health, let's say, or financial, economic health of your entire portfolio, versus having to be drilled down, like Brian said last time, sometimes the squeaky wheel gets most of the budget money. How do you use the tool to be able to do that, to really make big picture decisions?
Well, it's funny you said squeaky wheel. That's my first note I wrote down on this comment, actually. But I think being able to be able to be proactive instead of reactive is the number one key here, because once you get all this information, whether you have one property, not so much one property, but let's say you have a group of 10 properties, or even up to 250 or 300 properties, you're going to make decisions based on that whole large number. Let's say your budget's $2.5 million and you have to spend it in the best way possible. One job or 5 jobs might take up $2 million of that. Now I'm going to spend my other $500,000. Is it going to be the guy that's at so-and-so store that's loud, or is it going to be the fact that I know that I've got 17 potholes in this area of Michigan in 7 stores that I need to go take care of, and it's going to take care of a lot of my budget for me? And then that squeaky wheel might get pushed off to next year, because obviously we know by taking all this information, planning, and being able to create a 5, 3, 5, 6 year plan for this, that we know that next year that squeaky wheel is already on our plan, and will be budgeted for next year, because we were being proactive instead of reactive. And that's going to be a little bit harder for that squeaky wheel to understand, but they have to see that the whole process is from start to finish, overlooking the whole property portfolio instead of just one property. That information has been countless. I mean, it's helped me out many times to help people to decide, should I spend $35,000 patching this parking lot this year, or should I wait for 2 years or 3 years where I'm not going to do much on this parking lot because it is budgeted for 2 or 3 years from now? And when you have a large fleet of properties, if you can keep it in an organized fashion, it's a lot easier.
Sure. All right. That makes sense. That's great information. Brian, then can you dive into that a little bit more as well? Like making decisions on a portfolio basis instead of having to, get so granular site by site?
Yeah, I would say it's the biggest change that I see, that we see customers go through when we go through and do these types of assessments on a large scale. So hundreds of properties that we're completing for people and then driving that information back to them. You know, they're looking at, you know, the list that they had prioritized, and they're saying, man, I'm really surprised that these handful of sites that we had budgeted for replacement probably don't fit the mold of where they should be spending their money. And keeping in mind that, you know, what we do is look at it from a strictly, you know, payment assessment. We look at it blank slate, comparing everything apples to apples. Then of course we drive through that process. You know, is one location performing better than another, right? So if there's high traffic at one location in a retail setting, then that location might bump up the list, where somebody else's location that might be middle of the road, maybe it doesn't need something.
Can I interject real quick, Brian?
Yeah.
The one thing about that is that we can actually sometimes spend the money in a better situation for them, right? Because if they don't know that was, you know, I apologize. I forgot what I was going to say, dude. You might have to.
Yeah, all good, man. Yeah. So when you start bumping up the list of you know, the stores that are doing really well, and you put them up a little bit higher than the others, you just start looking at things from a much clearer perspective, where, you know, you're at the top of the list of what needs to be done. You have all your capital projects laid out, and really, you know, what we say to clients is it puts your entire portfolio on what we call cruise control, right? So after you get your arms around it, you get everything assessed, and you start prioritizing these stores. And a lot of retailers will look at, you know, their A stores, their B stores, their C stores, as far as revenue and profitability. And then, you know, so we take those payment assessments, we look at the PACER rankings and things like that, and then we implement that A, B, C ranking into their stores. And that's how we start guiding them through spending this money. So what we see is that, you know, instead of looking at this from a location by location standpoint and what repairs need to be done or what projects need to be done, you're looking at this from a much higher level, and you're making just more sound decisions with more information driven behind it, instead of, like Mike was talking about, that squeaky wheel getting the budget. And then, you know, you're misappropriating funds, and you're starting to get really behind the 8 ball with regard to how much budget you need to manage all these payment assets as a result. Because if you replace a parking lot 5 years too early that you shouldn't, that makes a huge difference in the total cost of ownership of actually managing and owning a payment asset. And people don't realize that. You know, they start to react to the things that are coming at them as property and facility managers, because that's how it works. If you don't have this type of information, you're gonna prioritize the stores based on the pressure that you're getting. The lack of information, you know, can drive that to a point where you make a decision to replace a lot too soon, and then the total cost of ownership to manage millions of square feet of pavement assets, it goes up significantly. So that's what we try to avoid.
Sure. No, that makes sense. All right, great answers. Mike, I think you got caught up. This is episode 3. You know how many people are listening? I understand. You got a little nervous there. The white hot spotlight.
I had a good point. I had a really good point, and I just kind of like lost it. So.
Oh man, all good. Well, you're going to make up for it here.
It's Friday, man. It's Friday. It's how it
is. Friday.
Exactly. So let's get a little granular here when we're talking about pavement assessments. Get into the nuts and bolts of it. What sort of information specifically should a facilities, and I'm going to throw this one to you, Brian, a facilities or property manager expect from their pavement assessments?
I think there's a variety of things. And number one, I would say to take a step back, we'll go through kind of what we provide and what I think people should expect. But the other thing that I would say to the people out there who are property and facility managers is you should expect the information that's important to you, not just what's important to the contractor.
That's a great point.
You know, for us, every time we have this conversation, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's like, here's what we provide to every single customer. Here's, you know, the approach that we take. But on the flip side, you should be, you know, telling us if there's anything else that we can do for you while we're out there, whether that be dumpster enclosures, or for convenience stores, the propane cages. If you want us to check that stuff, we can easily add that to the assessments that we do and provide additional value to the property and facility manager. With that said, you know, what we provide is the square footage of asphalt, the square footage of concrete, lineal footage of curbing. In certain cases, customers would like the catch basin counts. Anything that is really important to them, we can include on these assessments, because while we're out there doing these assessments, collecting that additional data for the customer just seems to make sense. And so, and in addition to that, they should be receiving some sort of rating. We use the PACER rating because, you know, from our standpoint, our belief is that we wanted third-party verification. We could have just as easily created a 1 through 10 scale ourselves, creating a document that says, hey, this is how the pavement group kind of ranks these parking lots. But we want you to trust the expertise of somebody else who's done extensive research. So the PACER rating is from the University of Wisconsin, and they've created this for DOT, for all kinds of different people to use. And so that's the guide that we use. It's a 1 through 10 scale. It has a manual so people can look at what we are rating their parking lot and then go to that manual and say, hey, does this make sense or does it not, right? It's, don't trust us, just go and verify the information. So I think that, you know, that kind of information, and then in coordination with that information, so the square footage of concrete, square footage of asphalt, linear footage of curbing, there should be coordinating photos that are coordinated, that you can see what is the condition of this lot, and do I agree with this assessment? Because again, this isn't us telling the property and facility managers this is how it is. It's a collaborative effort. It is, you know, really providing them information that they can see with their own eyes and verify against what they're seeing, right? So they can look at the PACER manual, they can look at the sites, and they can say, yes, we agree. This is an emergency issue. This is something that should be repaired if we have the budget. And so it becomes really a shoulder-to-shoulder approach, not a we're talking across the table. We're providing information and trying to create that collaboration between us and the client that ultimately results in them getting every piece of information on these assessments that they need to be most effective in their jobs.
That's right on, man. Mike, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, actually, I can't remember what I was trying to interrupt Brian for earlier.
All right, we're back.
Right. Really, what we're trying to do is we try to devise a strategy before the budget is even given. Because if we knew they were going to spend a certain amount of money, we might actually look at things differently and then create a plan based on that budget. Where I think if we start at the beginning, we don't know what that budget is, and we can able to objectively give our thoughts and feelings on what this property looks like, and keep it based on the PACER rating, based on you know, industry standard knowledge, that it's more objective, and then we're not really trying to build something based on money. And then they can decide, or the customer can decide, if they can budget to what we really think is wrong there. Like,
right,
not everything needs to be paved. Sometimes you can, you know, take care of things without spending $100,000, even though the manager or even one of the facility people are saying, well, our parking lot needs to be replaced. Well, it really doesn't. You have maybe 6 to 7 years before your parking lot needs to be replaced. Objectively, we can tell you that maybe you should spend a small amount this year and then nothing next year, and then maybe a small amount year 3, and then absolutely nothing until year 5 when your money is best spent. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just we are able to objectively look at something, give a concise report based on not our opinions, but, you know, other people's knowledge and other people's industry standards.
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing to add to that, man, is like we tell the customers what we're going to give you back is like in the perfect world scenario. You know, if you had an unlimited amount of money, you know, what would it look like? And we don't go crazy where we're trying to replace every single parking lot, but we give them an honest assessment of, this is where it stands. This is what we would recommend. Here's the total financial investment to get everything done that we would recommend in year 1. And then again, we start to reverse engineer that and back into, how do we take that and fit it into what is realistic? Like, what do they actually have to spend? And it works unbelievable when it's done in that order.
Experience shows that most customers already know what they need to spend. They have not, they're not just doing this willy-nilly. I mean, because the last one that we did, again, 100 and some properties, their budget was within a couple $100,000 of what we thought they needed this year and what we thought they needed next year and what they needed in year 3. Now, year 4 and year 5, we were able to actually save several $100,000 on that budget. But the first 3 years, they know what they need to spend. It's just, how are they going to spend it to be able to get to year 5 when they're actually starting to see or year 3 when they're starting to see the considerable savings because they've been proactive on the whole portfolio instead of just 1 or 2 jobs that get pushed back. And once that squeaky wheel's quiet, they don't get maintained, and then you're back in the same scenario over and over again. So, yeah. I think that's one of the biggest keys.
Awesome. So you guys have both said a few times talking about consistency and based on the data and based on the facts, really making decisions based on. And that's something that you hear a lot right now in the climate that we're living in, based on data, based on science, right? When people talk about reopening the country, for example, nobody knows the right answer exactly. A lot of it is just sort of gut feel or guess or whatever. So they default to the science and the facts and the data, right? Let's look at the numbers. Let's create our deltas, and then that's when we will move to the next phase or whatever it is. So you guys brought up a lot about just basing it on the facts and basing it on the data, and you take that push or that squeaky wheel or that contractor that's maybe trying to say, you take all that out of it, right? That's the benefit of using just sort of having a data-based approach. Mike, can we talk a little bit about that? So how you create that consistency and you can when you're making the decisions based on the data?
I think we're trying to call ourselves the experts here, but 3 experts are going to have 3 different opinions.
Sure.
So we try to use the same process with the same mindset. Like I said, not money related. It is objective what we see there. Base it on a PASER rating, based on a 1 through 3, or a severe, a poor, severe, good categories. And we do that for every single property, not just this one looks like this based on its own. We kind of set an overall goal for the whole campaign before we start, deciphering the data. So once we have that decided where the customer does not want a seal coat, does not want a crack seal, or they do want a crack seal because it's the best money that you can spend, we can start to create that plan that is, you can extrapolate that from year 1 to year 5 to year 7 if you want. And then it just consistently, we might need to relook at every property again next year. We might not need to look at every property again, but you're going to have an idea of what you're in for. And with that consistency of using the PASER rating and any other type of expert knowledge that's out there, I think has helped us out in a lot, because we don't have to make people, we're not trying to make people believe us. We're just putting enough information in front of them that they believe what they see because it's the truth.
Sure. I think what's great about this too is the fact that if someone said to you, hey, I got $2 million to spend in my portfolio this year, 0 chance we could ever get to it by putting everything in there accurately. You're not going to make up just to that dollar figure that they have. It's going to spit out exactly what the parking lots need, right? Correct. What do you say about that, Brian?
The one thing I was thinking while you were talking about that, because it's so, comparing it to what everybody's going through right now and thinking about with regard to what's going on in the world, I just wrote down asphalt. The good news is asphalt's much more predictable than what we're dealing with. It is
great point.
There are no question marks with regard to, kind of what should be done. And again, the question marks come in with what should be done and the lack of consistency when you don't have enough data to be able to make the right decision. So I would say, and we keep saying kind of leaning towards, not making the right decisions, but they are making the right decisions based on the information that they have. It is the facts and the data, again, to Mike's point, being delivered in a consistent, on every single site, the same way, the same method, the same approach every single time. Once you get all of that information, there are no question marks left as to what should be done. So creating that consistency is probably the single most important thing that they can do in approaching these sites. Because to Mike's point, we could sit here and say that, we are experts at what we do, but there are plenty of other contractors out there that are also experts. And but if we all go look at a property and we don't agree on the method at which we're going to approach those properties, we're going to get back different results.
Right.
They're not going to be consistent. And so when you look at these portfolio type accounts that we work with, it has to be, that consistency has to be there for them to be able to actually get the best result. Because if they start looking at things from 3 different ways, doesn't mean that one way is right or wrong. It means that there has to be consistency for you to be able to create that systematic approach to being able to get your arms around this and really putting that portfolio on what we call cruise control. It's like Mike said, you know, we went out and did a bunch of assessments for a client. We get to the end of it, they're within a couple $100,000. And their response to us was, man, we thought we were way off.
Yeah,
We thought we were never going to be able to catch up, because that's how it feels when you don't have the right information. You feel like you're constantly reactive.
You're guessing, right?
And you're constantly chasing your tail, right?
Yep. Awesome. Good stuff. All right. My last question that I have for you, you know, as you do this for a long time, I've been working with property and facility managers for close to 20 years, and you create some great friendships. So many wonderful people that are in that world, in that industry. And, you know that come August, they're all in hell. It just is what it is. It becomes budget season, and for 6 weeks, they are just buried. They can't do anything else. They're stressed out. How does the pavement assessment tool, or having a good assessment tool for anything really, how does that help with the budgeting season? How does that ease some of the stress and make their job easier? Brian, what do you think?
It's the single greatest gift that we can give to a property facility manager, because, you know, the question that, you know, we typically ask when we're in those conversations is, how long does it take, you know, for you to create these types of budgets? And the normal answer is anywhere in the range from 2 weeks to 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes, and that's not counting the time that it takes for them to collect the information out in the field and do all that kind of stuff. And so our question to them is, you know, if we could give you that information within seconds at any point in the year that you needed it, you know, how would that change, you know, how would that change your world? And the light bulb goes off. It's like, tell me how you're going to do that, because, you know, it is literally the most intense thing that they have to do is budgeting for every trade that they have. It's not just ours. And they're really, again, I think that the frustration comes in for the property and facility manager, because that's that time of year where they're trying to do the very best that they can, but they're lacking information. And so these pavement assessments that we do not only take away, you know, all of that pain that they go through trying to create a budget, and really, you know, in a lot of cases, they're taking educated guesses at what to do, but it gives them that information in an ongoing basis, right? Where at any point in the year, and so the way that our system works is that we go out and assess it. To Mike's point, we do it, you know, perfect world scenario. Here's everything that needs to be done. Then we allow them to pick and choose based on their budget for each individual site, for each region, for all that kind of stuff. And then as we do those repairs, after we go out and do that work, they get crossed off the list. But that assessment becomes a living, breathing document that they can go back to and see what else is left on these sites. So they really never have to do a budget again. They're just kind of refreshing the information into their brain. They're not going through that grinding process of what's going to get done and what's not. It's all really there for them, and they can prioritize it and sort it. And it just creates a very simple process for what used to be probably the most painful thing that they go through in a year.
Yeah. Awesome. Really well said, man. Mike, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, that was really well said. You pretty much got everything that I was thinking of. I wrote down is that I'm not as soft and fuzzy as Brian, but I think the data is the part that's the main part. It feels for everybody's feelings. I just want to strictly stick to the data, because that makes it just easier. It just makes it faster if you know exactly what's going on in your property at all times. What has been done, what needs to be done, how much it's going to cost me, how much I got budgeted for this other property that I might be able to move over here this year if I need to. All that information helps out a lot, and to know whether something is critically needing to be done, or if it can be let by because I need to spend this $3,000 at this other property, or I just don't have it this year. You know, that's critical, and it's going to be way faster for somebody to go in there and say, well, I got 3 red spots on here, give me a price on 1, 2, 3, click it, and then they're going to have a quote back in within several hours after that process has been done. So really, like I said, it's just put that data in front of me, let me make my decisions, and let's just get my job done. That's really the way I look at it. So
yeah, absolutely. And any way you look at it, you're looking out for the customer. We're trying to provide, and the warm and fuzzy side is the fact that we'll make it whatever you want it to be.
Absolutely.
You tell us what you need. And that's Brian and I. We'll do that. And then, Mike, you build it out. You're the brains behind the machine. We'll be the warm and fuzzy up front, the sales guys. How's that sound?
Mike says
that's fine by me. I'm fuzzy, but I'm just not so warm.
just give me the facts. But no, Mike said it earlier. It's like, we don't want to be providing them information or telling them what to do. We really want to build an approach and deliver information that makes it very clear. Like, we don't have to tell them what they need to do. They can look at it and make sense and reference it and go site to site and region by region and look at it. And it becomes, am I right, Mike? I mean, when we provide this information to a client, they literally almost every time say to us, like, this is just so easy, right? It just gives them a path. It's like the difference between driving across the country without a map and with having one, or with having GPS or having a map. That's the
well said. It's well said. So it's the information
guided.
It's the data, it's the customizable, and it's giving property managers and facilities managers some time back, some of their life back, the ability to focus on other things and get a little bit on autopilot, little cruise control.
I don't know what you guys think, but I think we should invite a property manager on this podcast to let them tell us what their biggest pain points are.
I agree.
I'm down for that. If there are any property managers out there, we're going to go info at The Pavement Group, Brian.
That's it. Info at thepavementgroup.com. Shoot us a message and we'll get you scheduled to be on here. And I'd love to have that conversation, man. That's a great idea, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, gentlemen, I think this was a great one. This was enlightening for me, learning more about the assessment tool and how it came to be, and the why, and obviously the what, which is really impressive. Any parting shots, Brian?
No, man. I mean, we mentioned it briefly, but, our mission as a company is literally to just simplify, everything about the jobs that those people have to do. Property and facility managers work long hours. They're constantly dealing with things. And, our mission in talking about this stuff and having this podcast and in doing pavement assessments, which was the topic today, is to really simplify that and give them their time back. I said it the other day, just a few days ago, is like, if we could give people hours a day back that they can go and spend with their family, we're winning. And that is what this tool is designed to do. And that's what this whole conversation hopefully gave people a picture of, is what could it be like if you actually had all this information. And, we'd be happy to provide that for you. And hopefully, even if it's not us, this last half an hour here that you just spent with us gives you the ability to know what to ask for from whomever you do work with.
Right on. Awesome, man. Mike, you want to put a bow on episode 3 here for us?
To me, the power of pavement assessments is just key to being able to produce ongoing plans for what you have in your future for your properties. If you don't know the information, it's hard to plan. And that's just really how this all started, and that's how it's going to keep going, is just to help people plan for what they have in their future and put as much critical data in front of us as completely possible. That's just been my goal since the beginning. It actually helped me move along as a salesperson in this industry, but it's turned into something else that is really for everybody else to be able to help them along in their processes also.
Awesome, man. Well said. Well, that wraps it up for episode 3 of the Pavement Group podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you have any ideas, anything you'd like to hear about, shoot us an email at info@thepavementgroup.com. We love what we do. We love who we work for. We want to keep providing value. So give us any feedback that you have, and we'll see you on episode 4. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it, guys.